we're glad you're here with us today. And when the holidays come, maybe they're like you're like for our family, they get really, really busy. It's like it all of a sudden goes from like everything's kind of chill and it's just nonstop all the time. And when that happens, it can be easy for us to kind of forget what is really important in life. It can be easy for us to get so caught up in the moment by moment, the planning and the details, that we forget what is this season really about and how do we stay on mission. And so at City Alliance Church, since the very beginning, our mission has been really, really clear. In fact, let me just review it with us real quick. Our mission is this: to join with Christ, to transform Williamsport with the gospel for the glory of God and the good of the city. So we are joining with Jesus. Jesus is on mission. We see this in the Great Commission where he says to go into all the world and make disciples of all men, to transform Williamsport with the gospel. And the reason why this is so important is because the gospel changes everything. Many of us who are in this room or are watching online, we've experienced the transformational power of Jesus. We've experienced forgiveness from our past. We've experienced a new life. We've experienced just his complete love for us, meaning, purpose, hope. We've had all these experiences, and there's something in us that's like we want to be part of Jesus' mission to share that. And when Jesus is involved, he makes everything better. Systems are transformed. Lives are changed because Jesus is in the mix. And we want every single person to know that. That's what kind of moves us. That's what kind of puts us into action here. And so as we get into the holidays, as we get into the busyness of Thanksgiving and Christmas and all the different things there, I just want to encourage us, let's not forget the bigger picture. Let's not forget why God has placed us in certain places. So here's the question I want to throw out to you. And I'm going to hit this question a lot this morning. It's this: who's the person closest to you who's furthest from God? So you can write this down. You can put this in your phone if you're taking notes. You can get a tattoo of this, whatever you need to do to remember this. But this Christmas season, who is someone that's close to you? This could be a family member. This could be a friend. This could be a spouse. It could be one of your kids. It could be one of your parents. But who's the person that's close to you that you think about, that your heart breaks for, that is far from God? Maybe this holiday season, maybe this Christmas season, God is going to do something in you and through you so that you can help them take one step closer to God, one step closer to understanding who Jesus is. And so that's why we're going to look at that story in Matthew chapter 13 that Alyssa just read. And, it's a really simple story. It's a story about scattering seeds. Delayed reaction there. Yeah, we have a splash zone. That's why you notice the first couple pews are empty. But this is a simple story about Jesus scattering seeds. Let's go ahead and jump into this here. One of the things that you need to know about Jesus is a master storyteller. Jesus would find ways to kind of make connections from everyday normal things to spiritual realities. That's what are called parables. Parables are simply simple stories that explain spiritual realities. And so Jesus is kind of breaking down this story to his disciples. And it says this, if you're following along. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such a large crowd gathered around him that he got into a boat and he sat in it. And while all the people stood on the shore, he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow seed. So this is probably what happened, is that Jesus is kind of walking to this lake and he sees this large crowd and he wants to make sure that they can hear him. And so what Jesus does is he gets in a boat. And in the Sea of Galilee, there are these really high cliff walls. So it's almost like an auditorium. So Jesus' voice can reverberate around so people could hear him and what he's saying. But I'm sure while he's walking, he's looking around and he sees an everyday normal occurrence, and it is a farmer with a bag that's simply going around scattering his seed. He's trying to make things grow, and he's kind of throwing it indiscriminately. That's kind of what he means by sowing seed. Let's go ahead and see what it says here. It says, as he was scattering the seed, some seed fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some seeds fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly, because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and they withered, because they had no root. Other seed fell among the thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still others fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 100, 60, or 30 times what it was sown. He who has ears, let him hear. I got to ask you, how many of you guys have heard this story before? Yeah, quite a few of you have. If you grew up going to church, like this is a kind of a pretty popular story. It's one that we tell a lot. But in this story, there are 4 types of people that Jesus identifies, 4 types of soils of folks in our lives that we have the opportunity to influence and help take a step closer to knowing God and knowing Jesus. And the first group that we see in this passage is the consistent resistant, okay? The consistent resistant. And Jesus talks about these folks in verse 19, where he actually breaks down the story, he decodes it for his disciples. He says this, "When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart. This is the seed sown along the path." So these are people in your life that maybe you've shared the seeds of God's word or seeds of the gospel, but it doesn't seem to penetrate. It doesn't seem like it phases them. It doesn't seem like it makes any difference. And maybe you have these people in your life where you have maybe spiritual conversations, but they're just not interested. They don't care. Or maybe they're even a little hostile. They actually take great offense to what you're saying, and they kind of fight back, or they attack you, or they mock you because of your faith and what you hold on to. These are folks that are the consistent resistant. Any of you know any folks like that in your life? You have someone that's maybe consistently resistant? I see a couple of hands. How many of you are that person? Just kidding, you don't need to answer that. You can go ahead and comment that online. But we have these folks in our lives that are consistently resistant to what we have to share. Now, I remember years ago, I was working at a restaurant. This is when I was attending seminary, so I was studying to be a pastor. So I'm at this restaurant, and I'm working, and I had this one boss, great guy. But when he found out that I was a Christian, when he found out that I was, studying to be a pastor, all of a sudden, like a switch changed. All of a sudden, he was kind of nasty to me. Anytime faith would come up, he would get really, really angry and really, really just attack and mock. And it wasn't just him. There was all these other guys that I worked with who would just kind of gang up on me, and it was a bit much. And I remember one day, I got so frustrated that, we had a fight about it. And I remember what he said to me. He said, "Nathan, you're a nice guy. I like you, but I have no interest. In fact, I really want nothing to do when you talk about faith. My parents had to leave Russia because they were Jewish. And so I just see all the damage that religion does in this world, and I want nothing to do with it." And I remember hearing his story for the first time and kind of understanding why there was such deep resistance and even resentment towards religion from my boss. And oftentimes when you have people like that are just consistently resistant, we just want to give up on them, don't we? We just I don't want to deal with this. But yet, God has put you in that person's life. Maybe the only thing you're called to do is to listen and to pray. Maybe you're not going to convince them. Maybe you're not going to have a great story of how they went from all the way here, then all of a sudden they crossed the faith line. Maybe your job is just to love on them. Because here's the thing, only God can change people's hearts, amen? Only God can open us up. We can't convert anybody. That's only a work of God. And sometimes the megaphone that God uses to get people's attention is pain. And maybe God wants you to be consistent in that person's life, so when those moments of pain hit, when those moments of suffering come, you can walk alongside with them, to encourage them, to kind of help them in those hard and difficult times. And you know what? It's interesting, because over the years, I hadn't worked at that job for about 15 years, but I get Facebook messages from some of those guys I worked with, today, in the past couple of years. I remember I got a message from a guy the other day. He goes, "Hey, Nathan, I just want to say I want to apologize for kind of busting your chops about what you believe, because I started dating this girl, found out she was a Christian, I gave my life to Christ, and now I'm going to church, and now I'm involved." And I remember getting a couple messages even recently, "Hey, Nathan, I know that you pray. Can you pray for me? My wife and I were really having a hard time conceiving. I don't know what else to do. Can you pray?" Or, "Hey, Nathan, I just got diagnosed with this disease, and would you just pray?" And I find that I'm doing more ministry with some of these guys a decade later than I will in that moment. Guys, you don't know what God is going to do with the way you act and the way you live right here and right now with the consistently resistant people. Because sometimes it's almost like grass breaking through concrete. Have you ever seen that? Maybe you're fighting grass breaking through concrete right now. It's subtle, it's small, but over time, it has the ability to break through the hardest hearts. That's what the seeds of the gospel can do. So who's the person that's closest to you, that's furthest from God? Are they the consistent resistant? Or maybe they are an impulsive imitator. Maybe you've got someone who's an impulsive imitator. Maybe they get really excited about spiritual things. They get excited about church and they show up and then they stop. all of a sudden. Jesus talks about these folks. He says this in verse 20. He says, the one who received the seed that fell on the rocky places is the man who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since he has no root, he lasts only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, he quickly falls away. These would be folks that you would consider fair weather fans. They love the team and they are cheering the team when the team is doing well, but when they start failing, when they start falling apart, they're gone. And I think if there's anyone that's experiencing that right now, it's got to be the Kansas City Chiefs, okay? I don't know if you guys are Chiefs fans, but they are selling out stadiums, they are selling out jerseys, and it's not because they're playing any better than they've ever played. It's not because of anything that they've done. It is because of one person, and that is Taylor Swift, okay? When you are dating the most powerful woman in the world, people take notice. And so right now, all the Swifties, they're buying all the tickets and they're buying all the jerseys because they're hoping maybe I can get a glimpse of Taylor when I'm at the stadium and all those kind of things. But you know what's going to happen? At some point, they're going to break up, Taylor's going to write a song, and the Chiefs are going to be in a worse position than they've ever been before. They're going to lose fans. But this is exactly what Jesus is talking about here. Maybe you have people in your life that, you've invited them to church and they've come and they love the music and the folks here are friendly and they love all the stuff that we're doing for family and they get really, really excited. But then all of a sudden they realize that Jesus is asking something of them our entire lives. He's inviting us to surrender to him. And then they're out. You're like, what happened? I remember a good friend of mine had been praying for a friend of his to come to Christ, and so he invited him to church because he knew he was going through a really rough time. He was in the middle of a divorce, and so he was coming, and he just jumped headfirst into everything. He's on the greeting team, and he's going to a small group, and he's getting super involved, and he's sitting up front, and all the things, and then all of a sudden, he was gone. And my friend is texting him, and he ghosted him, and he's like, what is going on here? And we just found out a little bit later that once his divorce was finalized and once his life kind of had a new rhythm, he's like, I don't think I need God anymore. I don't think I need any of this spiritual stuff, and he was gone. And I'm not saying that to judge him, but that's just reality. We live in a consumer world. We are inadvertently discipled to be consumers, and when something doesn't meet our need anymore, we're gone. Unless we have an encounter with Jesus. And so maybe you've had friends who've done that. They've come and you thought they're making steps and they're growing in their faith, but then they kind of ghost you and they don't want anything to do with it anymore. Does that mean that you just kind of take a step back from them, that you just kind of walk away? See, no, you're still called to love on them and to invest in them and to pray for them. In fact, I was reading in preparation for this message a blog on gardening. Any gardeners in here, by the way? Anyone who loves the garden? How many of you have the gift of killing plants? That is a spiritual, awesome, you're my people right there. We should all hang out, but not in gardens. But anyway, this is a really interesting, because it was talking about what do you do when you have rocky soil and you can't always kind of, get it out? What do you do with that? And so here's what they said here. They said this, is when you have rocky soil, what you do is you actually put good soil on top of the rocky soil. And what that does is it gives the seeds room to kind of grow and to move around. And, Jesus, check this out. Jesus is the master gardener, right? So if you think of the people in your life that they're rocky, they're the impulsive imitators in your life, you know what God has done? He's placed you in their lives. You're the good soil. You're there to love on them and to pray for them and to encourage them. And you don't know what God is going to do with how you live your life with them. You don't know what God is going to do with the words that you speak to them. You're just simply called to be faithful in the place that you're with. And maybe there'll be a time when they're experiencing suffering. And they thought, man, I thought if I followed Jesus or I checked the church thing off my list, there would be no more suffering. And you can come alongside them and encourage them and say, listen, Jesus doesn't promise a pain-free life, but he promises to be with you in those times of suffering. He promises to walk with you even when things are difficult. He promises his presence. So I got to ask the question again. Who's the person closest to you who's furthest from God? And maybe a face is coming to your mind right now. Maybe someone is coming to mind. Go ahead and write their name down. Put their name in your phone. I want us to hold on to that name as we continue in this message, because Jesus also talks about another group, and these are the folks that I would call the hesitant residents. These are the folks that are on the fence. Jesus talks about them in verse 22, where he says this, the one who received the seed that fell among the thorns is the man who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke it out, making it unfruitful. So this is someone who, man, they love, the spiritual idea of things, and they're really involved, but they just get so caught up with life. It kind of pulls them apart, and that they can't even give their full focus to it. When I think about life in Williamsport, here's what I come up with. Life in Williamsport means that we're stressed and strapped. I mean, think about it. So how many of us struggle with some type of anxiety? We are always on the go. We're always busy, and now as the holidays approach, we're going to get busier. It's just going to get amped up. And we're worried about our finances. We're worried about the economy. We're worried about all sorts of things. You fill in the blank. And then on top of that, if we have kids, we're worried about our kids. Are our kids going to be okay? Are they going to be contributing members of society? Like, what's going to happen with them? And we kind of wrestle with those kind of things, and they end up taking up all of our time to the point where we literally don't have peace because literally it's happening in our brains. It's like a cycle. Or how about the deceitfulness of wealth? We just think, man, things are tough right now, but what would be better if it made a little bit more? A little bit more. If I made a little bit more, then I would have peace. If I had made a little bit more, I'd have a little bit of joy. If I had a little bit more, my life would be less chaotic. But sometimes we get a little bit more, and our life gets more chaotic, not less. And so oftentimes, these hesitant residents, they're sitting on the fence to the point where they have a wedgie. But it's just comfortable. I remember years ago, I was talking to a buddy of mine, and we were at a restaurant, and we're having this conversation. And this is a guy that, I'd known for a long, long time. And we're having conversations about, philosophy and theology and politics. And so, we would always have these spiritual conversations. And one day he said to me, Nathan, I believe what you believe. I go, what do you think I believe? Let's talk about that. He goes, well, I believe that Jesus is God, and I believe that he died for my sins, and he wants to save me. He's got a plan for my life and purpose and meaning, but I don't want to follow him right now. I was like, oh, well, tell me more about that. He goes, well, listen, man, I love the way my life is right now. I love that I can do whatever I want when I want. I love that I can hook up with whoever I want to hook up with. I love that I can do whatever I want with my money. If I start following Jesus, he's going to require my entire life. And on the one hand, I was talking to my friend. I'm like, man, he gets it. He really gets what this is about. But on the other hand, I also felt frustrated because I'm like, he gets it. He gets it. But for him, it wasn't what was going to move him forward. And when you uproot the thorns, folks that are kind of in those kind of thorny places, we're going to get pricked. That's what's part of working with thorny ground. But again, God's not calling us to take a step back, but to take a step forward. To continue to pray, to continue to love, to continue to care for the people that maybe are the most difficult in our lives. The consistently resistant folks, the impulsive imitators, the hesitant residents, maybe who struggle with analysis paralysis. So I got to ask, when I think about that question, who's the person closest to you and furthest from God, which category are they in? Are they the consistent resistant? Are they more of the impulsive imitator? Are they more of the hesitant resident? Maybe they're a combination. Because I think of the friends in my life, they're kind of a combination of all of those things. But how can we help them take a step forward? How can we help them kind of, how do we make sure that when we are sowing those seeds of gospel truth and gospel life, that they actually fall in the right spots? And how do we know it's just not kind of random throwing? Well, here's one of the things I appreciate about our church. We actually have a seed throwing strategy at City Alliance. And it's what I call invest and invite. Invest and invite. Now, for those of us that call City Alliance Church home, we love our church. I have conversations with you all the time. You love the friendly people. You love the music. The music is amazing. You put up with the preaching, which I appreciate. Thank you for that. But you love this church. You are committed and you are all in. And I love kind of hearing about how God is, moving in your hearts and how he's changing you. And I know you're inviting, but let's kind of have an honest conversation here. It's kind of awkward to invite someone to church sometimes, right? Unless it's something like a baptism or a baby dedication, it can be kind of awkward. It's easier to invite someone to go to the playground and play, or maybe to, get a cup of coffee, but it's always a little weird. And I think maybe for some of us, it's because we don't want to come off like Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. You guys ever have the Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons come to your house? How many of you try to trap them and become their friends? Just me? Okay, a couple of you, right? We should all talk later. But I'll be honest, what kind of bothers me about this approach is that they don't care about me. They're not coming to my door and saying, hey, how you doing? Like, what's going on with your life? Like, they really just want one thing. They want a convert. They want a notch on their belt. I'm a target on their back. But that's not what the gospel calls us to do. We are called to love and invest in the places that God has called us to be. We are called to invest time to hear people's stories, to hear their hurts, to hear their dreams, to see how we can come alongside and help them and really be in that relationship. So when it comes to investing at City Lion Church, and if you've been here, you kind of know this. We have 5 practices that we're encouraging everyone to kind of live out. We call them the blessed practices. And we kind of talk about them from time to time. But really, there's 5 ways that we invest in the people in our lives. The first is we want to begin with prayer. We believe that prayer is the most important thing. Prayer is what changes hearts. There's nothing I can say, there's no argument that I can come up with that is powerful enough to move people, but it's God. So we are called to pray for people, where they're at, praying for whatever needs that they have that comes up. And people are very open to prayer. I mean, my wife was at the school the other day, and someone was saying, hey, I'm going for a job interview. And she goes, can I pray for you? And she prayed for her right on the spot. People want prayer. People need prayer. People are open to prayer. So begin with prayer. And then the second one is to listen carefully. This can be a challenge for those of us that are verbal processors. Any verbal processors in the room? Okay, great. The 3 of us will just get together and talk. It'll be great. But this is our challenge. Like, how do we really listen to people? Like, listen to their hurts and their hopes and their dreams and understand where they're coming from. Because sometimes I'll talk to somebody and they've got church hurt. They've been hurt by the church. They've been hurt by believers. And so you know what? My next step for them isn't to invite them to church. It's just simply to hear their story and to build that relationship with them. For some people, they're looking for hope. They're looking for community. They're looking for a place to belong. And so they say, hey, you should come join us on Sunday morning. And they'll find a place to land there. But we have to listen carefully. This third one is my favorite. Eat together. There's just something that happens when you sit down for a meal for somebody. Like, you are able to open your heart. They are able to open their hearts. There's a vulnerability that happens when we can have a meal together, whether it's coffee or lunch or dinner. Having a meal together is just a way that we can invest in people. And make sure that you tip your server 20% or more, okay? Some of you know who I'm talking to, okay? Let's leave it at that. The next one here is to serve others. Guys, love is something that we show. It's not just enough to talk about it, but how do we show love to the community that we're in? I know many of you are involved in serving outside of our church walls, which is awesome. Keep it up. Some of you are serving in different capacities here. But can I share with you something that God's teaching me? Sometimes receiving other people serving you is a way to invest in other people. Last year, you guys know I was recovering from knee surgery, and so I couldn't remove snow from my walkway. And so my neighbor, who I don't think is a believer, just came and just got his snowblower out and snowblowed my corner lot, which was awesome. And I went to thank him. He goes, oh, dude, thank you. I love doing that kind of stuff. So it was an honor for me to serve you. I know that for us, we can get kind of prideful about that, but if you maybe allow yourself to be vulnerable and allow others to serve you, God can use that in your lives as a way to invest in people who are far from God. And finally, share your story. This comes at the end, because after you listen, you can listen for the right opportunity to share what God is doing in your life. How is God transforming you? How is he changing you? And you can share that and invite people to take their next step. Because here's the thing, guys. The way of Jesus is not door to door. It's heart to heart. It's heart to heart. Are we in a place where we're listening and praying and really understanding people's stories and disappointments so we know what we want to invite them to, what their next step is? And so that's a little bit of kind of what the advantages that we have in this season that we're about to enter into. It's like the Thanksgiving and Christmas season, because this is a time where we can get so caught up in the busyness that we kind of lose focus on what God has called us to do. So I want to encourage us during this season to remember to invest and to invite. Because here's something that's interesting. 63% of people who don't go to church believe that going to church as part of Christmas Eve is a part of the tradition. Like, you should go to church on Christmas Eve. So, some of you probably heard of CEOs, Christmas and Easter only Christians. So they're going to get 50% of their time in the next couple of weeks. So this is a great opportunity for folks in your life for them to take a step closer to Christ. This happens almost every year, but there's usually it's a man, it's a husband. He's in his mid-40s, and he has no desire to think about spirituality. He's got no desire to think about religion. But then his wife wants him to begin a relationship with Jesus, and so she'll invite him to come to Christmas Eve somewhere. And here's the thing, he'll say yes. Why? Because this is what we do as a family. Christmas Eve, we find a church, and we go and worship together. So who's the family that's close to you, but far from God? Who's the fan, someone that you guys go cheer Penn State with together, who's close to you, but far from God? Who's the child or the parent in your life that's close to you, but they're far from God? What if this is the time where you can actually start to plant seeds, but seeds that actually take root and can be life-changing? Maybe some of you are thinking, well, Nathan, I know the Christmas Eve's coming up, but my friends aren't ready for Christmas Eve service. Well, would they come to a party? Because I sometimes, before I'll invite someone to Christmas Eve, I'll say, you should come to our Christmas Eve party. So we do a church-wide party on December 10th. This is my invite to everyone. All y'all can come and join us at our Christmas Eve party. We're going to sing some Christmas carols. There's going to be some skits. There's going to be some amazing food. It's a potluck. You can go ahead and hover your phone over there. But we have a lot of folks who come for the first time to our Christmas party because they're like, you know what, Nathan, I'm not really into the church thing, but I love parties and I love food, so I will come to that. And so you will get some of your blessed practices in just from that, inviting people to eat with you at the Christmas party. So put that on your calendar if you haven't yet, December 10th. But I want to encourage you, bring a friend. This is a great opportunity for you to bring someone to kind of meet the folks in your church. And here's the other thing I tell people, I tell Christians all the time, listen, here's the best way that you can help people know Jesus. Just don't be weird, okay? Some of you are snickering because you know what I'm talking about. Some of you know those Christians yeah, I'm not like them. Okay, I'm normal, right? So again, don't be weird. Invite them to the Christmas party. It's a great way to say, look, our community's not weird. We are normal human beings that live in Williamsport, things like that. But there's something else for some of you that are ready to maybe invite your friends to kind of come to a service where they can hear the gospel. We're taking a risk this year. One of our values is risk as a church. So because Christmas Eve falls on a Sunday this year, we're going to be offering 3 service times on Christmas Eve, 10 a.m., 4 p.m., and 6 p.m. And the reason for that is we want to create more opportunities for you to celebrate the birth of Jesus with your friends and your family. I know some of you travel, but this is a great opportunity for you to invite people to say, hey, will you come sit with me on Christmas Eve? Will you and your family come and join me as we celebrate Jesus' birth together? It's a great opportunity for you to take that step. Because here's the thing, and Jesus is going to talk about this in this passage. Some of the people that you've been praying for, that you've been doing life with, that you've been spending time with, some of those people are going to be this 4th category that Jesus talks about, which is the ready responder. They're ready. You may not be sure if they're ready, but Jesus knows they're ready. And maybe what they're waiting for from you is an invitation. I know that for some of you, there's people who you've been spending time with, who you've been praying for, who you've been eating with, who you've been, taking your kids on rides with, going back and forth and carpooling, that they're waiting for your invitation. Your invitation is going to be the very thing that they're finally going to say yes to, and then begin following Jesus because they're ready. They're the ready responder. In fact, some of you in this room, some of you watching online, you were the ready responder. Someone invited you to come to something at church. Someone invited you to come into their home. Someone invited you to a small group, and you said yes, and it's changed your life. Don't you think God wants to do that again? Don't you think God wants to do that again? He does. And he wants to do it through you. So who's the person closest to you who's the furthest from God? We're going to wrap up here in a second. But some of you, when you came in, you got one of these Christmas Eve invite cards. Why don't you go ahead on your way out and take a couple more? Because here's what I'd like you to do. Take one of these and put them on your refrigerator so that you can pray for that person who's close to you and far from God. And then with the other 2, I'm going to ask you to maybe do something bold. Take a risk. Maybe there's 2 people that you can share this card with and say, hey, will you sit with me on Christmas Eve? I got a pew area that's set for you. Would you take that risk this Christmas season to invite them to come and sit with you, to come and celebrate the birth of Jesus together? So can I ask you a question as we come to a close? We ask this question, who's the person closest to you who's the furthest from God? If you've got someone that comes to mind right now, would you just do this for them? Would you just go ahead and put your hand up? If there's someone coming to mind that you're thinking of, because I want to pray for you right now. I want to pray for your friends. So, Spirit of God, you see these hands that are up right now? We've got people in our lives that we love. Some of them are family members. Some of them are friends. Some of them are coworkers. Some of them are our local barista. It's the person that checks out our groceries. There's people in our lives. Maybe they're just close by proximity, but they're far from you. God, I pray this season we would start throwing some seeds out. God, I pray, Lord, that even if we get a no, Lord, it's one seed that's been planted. And maybe one day that no will become a yes later. So, Father, I pray that you give my brothers and sisters courage. I pray, Lord God, that you would give them opportunity. Lord, I pray that this Christmas season there would be multiple opportunities to invite, multiple opportunities to pray, multiple opportunities to eat together, to bless. And God, I also pray, Lord, for the ready responders, those who are waiting for that invitation, who are about to have a breakthrough because we took a bold step to invite. So, Spirit of God, we trust you. We lean into you. And so, God, as we go into this Christmas season, God, we remember that you came from heaven to earth to give us a home in you. I pray, Lord, that you would help us join with you on your mission, transform Williamsport for the glory of God and the good of the city. In your name, amen.